They called it the steel that built America. From the towering skyline of New York to the warships that fought in the Pacific, from the Golden Gate Bridge to the railroads that bound the nation together, one company's metal shaped it all. Its name was Bethlehem Steel. For nearly a century, it was a symbol of American power, a roaring forge of industry that turned raw iron into progress itself. But like so many empires of ambition, it would one day stand hollow, its furnaces silent, its workers gone, its mighty mills rusting beneath the rain. This is the story of how a company that built America lost everything it had created. The story begins in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania in the mid-1800s, a sleepy town on the banks of the Lehigh River. In 1857, a small iron company opened its doors, known modestly as the Bethlehem Iron Company. It had one purpose: to supply rails for the expanding American railroads, the veins through which the nation's commerce and dreams would flow. But what began as a regional mill would soon find itself at the center of a new industrial revolution. By 1899, under the leadership of Charles M. Schwab, a name soon synonymous with American steel, the company was reborn as Bethlehem Steel Corporation. Schwab wasn't just another industrialist. He was a showman of capitalism, a man who believed that ambition was the only religion worth following. He had learned under Andrew Carnegie, the titan of steel himself, and he carried forward the ruthless efficiency, innovation, and ego that defined that era. Schwab's vision was simple. We will not just make steel, we will make the future out of it. And for a time, that's exactly what Bethlehem Steel did. At the turn of the 20th century, America's appetite for steel was insatiable. Cities were rising higher, bridges were stretching farther, and the United States Navy was turning into a global force. Bethlehem Steel supplied the girders for the Empire State Building, the Golden Gate Bridge, and the Chrysler Building. Its rails crisscrossed the continent. Its armor plate covered battleships that would patrol the world's oceans. By 1914, Bethlehem Steel was the second largest steel producer in America. Its slogan might as well have been written in fire. We make everything from skyscrapers to super dreadnoughts. When World War I erupted, the company became an arsenal of democracy before the phrase even existed. Its mills worked day and night forging cannons, shells, and armor plate. The profits were enormous, the growth staggering. Yet behind the smoke and success, something else was forming, a belief that Bethlehem Steel's dominance would never end. The 1920s through the 1950s were Bethlehem Steel's golden decades. At its peak, it employed more than 300,000 people across the United States. In its hometown of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the furnaces lit up the night sky, a red-orange glow that locals called the endless sunset. Generations of families worked there, fathers, sons, brothers, their lives tied to the rhythm of molten metal. The company offered stability, pensions, and pride. To work for Bethlehem Steel meant you had made it. It was blue-collar royalty. Bethlehem built entire communities around its mills, schools, housing, recreation halls, a world where labor and loyalty intertwined. It became not just an employer, but an identity. And as America fought World War II, Bethlehem Steel became a national hero. Its shipyards built over 1,000 warships, from destroyers to aircraft carriers. Its steel armored the tanks that rolled through Europe and the Pacific. Every victory seemed forged in Bethlehem metal. By the 1950s, Bethlehem Steel's empire spanned coast to coast. It operated huge plants in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New York. Its chairman dined with presidents. Its logo appeared in magazines alongside Ford, GM, and Boeing. Bethlehem was America. Industrial, confident, unstoppable. But every empire carries within it the seeds of its fall. The trouble didn't start with one dramatic collapse. It began as a whisper in the furnaces. In the 1960s, American industry was changing. Foreign competition, once an afterthought, began to rise, especially from Japan and West Germany, whose post-war industries were modern, efficient, and hungry. Bethlehem Steel's mills, by contrast, were massive but aging. Its blast furnaces dated back decades. While competitors introduced electric furnaces and continuous casting, Bethlehem clung to the old ways. The company was making profits, but it was also making excuses. Executives said modernization was too expensive, that the old furnaces still worked fine. In reality, modernization would have cut into short-term profits, something the board refused to tolerate. Meanwhile, labor costs grew. Workers demanded and deserved better pay and benefits. But the contracts became heavy burdens when global prices dropped. Steel from Japan could land in California cheaper than Bethlehem could ship it from Pennsylvania. And then came the environmental regulations of the 1970s: air pollution, water contamination, waste disposal. Bethlehem's giant furnaces, once symbols of progress, became environmental nightmares. The company was slow to adapt, slow to automate, slow to see the new world forming around it. In short, it had become what it once defeated: a giant too proud to change. Inside the boardrooms, executives still toasted profits. They focused on quarterly numbers, not decades of survival. They built office towers and golf courses instead of investing in innovation. Charles M. Schwab's daring spirit had long since died. Now, the company was run by committees. By the 1970s, it was a slow, bureaucratic dinosaur competing against lean, agile predators. In 1977, Chairman Edmund F. Martin famously said, "We are not worried about imports. The American market belongs to American steel." Within 10 years, that statement would sound like hubris carved in rust. The 1973 oil crisis hit like a hammer. Energy costs soared, inflation squeezed profits, construction slowed. Shipbuilding contracts disappeared. Bethlehem Steel, which had always relied on big industrial projects, suddenly faced shrinking demand. And unlike newer companies, it couldn't pivot. It was tied to enormous plants, enormous payrolls, and enormous debt. By the late 1970s, steel imports had captured over 20% of the US market. American producers begged Washington for tariffs and relief, but the tide was irreversible. Consumers wanted cheap steel. Industries adapted. Globalization had arrived. Inside the Bethlehem headquarters, panic grew. Reports showed red ink everywhere. Managers tried layoffs, then plant closures. Entire communities, towns that had lived by the mill, began to die with it. In the 1980s, Bethlehem Steel began shuttering its historic plants one by one. In Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the blast furnaces that had burned for nearly a century went cold. Workers who had given their lives to the company were told to collect their pensions that the company could no longer fully fund. For those families, it wasn't just the loss of a job, it was the loss of identity. The skyline that once glowed red at night became dark, silent, ghostly. Bars, schools, and diners closed. The sound of the whistle at shift change gone forever. The fall of Bethlehem Steel wasn't just a corporate collapse, it was a cultural wound. It marked the end of the American industrial era, the shift from making things to managing things. Through the 1980s and 1990s, Bethlehem Steel tried to reinvent itself. It diversified into construction, bought new mills, and even installed some modern technology. But it was too little, too late. Competitors like Nucor were already using mini mills and recycling scrap steel at a fraction of the cost. Foreign producers had captured global supply chains. Bethlehem's old furnaces couldn't compete on speed, cost, or flexibility. The company fought on, but it was fighting gravity. In 2001, already crippled by debt and legacy costs, Bethlehem Steel filed for bankruptcy. The empire that had built bridges, skyscrapers, and ships was officially gone. 2 years later, its remaining assets were sold to International Steel Group, which itself would merge into the modern giant ArcelorMittal. The name Bethlehem Steel disappeared from the business world, but not from memory. Today, if you visit Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, you'll find the old blast furnaces still standing. But now they are silent monuments, preserved as part of the Steel Stacks Arts and Culture Complex. Concerts, festivals, and films take place in the shadow of the very furnaces that once powered a nation. At night, they light the rusted towers with red spotlights, honoring both the industry and the people who built it. It's hauntingly beautiful and deeply symbolic, because Bethlehem Steel's story isn't just about metal, it's about ambition. The same fire that built cities can also consume the men who light it. Bethlehem Steel believed its dominance was permanent. But industries are like living organisms. They evolve or die. When Japan modernized its mills, Bethlehem hesitated. That hesitation cost it everything. Pride became complacency. The company that once symbolized progress became addicted to the past. Its executives stopped asking what's next and started saying that's how we've always done it. The world changed, markets opened, technology spread, and labor costs found equilibrium. Bethlehem Steel's empire was built for a closed world. When that world opened, it crumbled. For decades, the company seemed unshakable. Then, in just a few years, it was gone. Decline often hides behind familiar routines until suddenly, the routines stop. Talk to any old steelworker from Bethlehem, and they'll tell you, we didn't just make steel, we made history. Their pride remains, because for all the corporate missteps, the workers of Bethlehem Steel forged the literal backbone of America. They gave the country its bridges, its ships, its skyline, and in doing so became part of something larger than themselves. Their story deserves to be remembered not as a tale of failure, but as a warning wrapped in gratitude, a reminder that no power, industrial or human, lasts forever. As the camera pans across the rusted furnaces of Bethlehem, the sunlight hits the old steel just right, a glint of gold in a sea of decay. You can almost hear the echo of hammers, the hiss of molten metal, the whistle calling men to their shifts. It's quiet now, but for nearly a century, this place roared like a dragon. The dragon may have died, but its fire built a nation. Bethlehem Steel, the giant that built America, then crumbled into dust.